They didn't just remove a prime minister. They tried to erase a symbol. Patrice Lumumba survived Belgian colonial rule, built a national movement from nothing, and became the first prime minister of an independent Congo, only to be captured, tortured, and executed less than a year later. His body was dissolved in acid, his remains scattered, and for decades, key documents about his death sat hidden in archives from Brussels to Washington. So why was this one man such a threat that Western governments, mining companies, and local elites all moved against him? In this video, you're going to walk through the rise and fall of Patrice Lumumba, from a small village in Congo to the independence podium, to the secret night in Katanga where a firing squad tried to silence him forever, and how his ghost still haunts the fight over Congo's mineral wealth today. Patrice Lumumba's story goes beyond just one person. It is the story of what happens when a colonized nation dares to demand real freedom in a world still controlled by empires, companies, and secret deals. To understand why he was celebrated, feared, and ultimately killed, you have to start long before the bullets back in the Belgian Congo. Patrice Emery Lumumba was born on July 2nd, 1925, in a small village called Onalua, in the Kasai region of what was then the Belgian Congo. His parents were not rich. His father was a farmer, and like millions of Congolese, the family lived under a colonial system built on forced labor, racial humiliation, and violence. Under Belgian rule, Congolese people were treated as cheap hands for rubber, copper, and uranium, with no real political rights and almost no access to high-level education. Lumumba grew up in that pressure cooker, seeing the inequality every single day. As a young man, he worked ordinary jobs, postal clerk, beer salesman, and later a clerk in the colonial administration. But he had something dangerous for a colony: a sharp mind, a talent for words, and a hunger for books. He educated himself, read widely, and started writing articles and giving speeches. What began as quiet ambition turned into a political awakening. He started to speak not only about individual success, but about dignity for the Congolese people as a whole. In the 1950s, the winds of independence were blowing across Africa. Ghana had broken free, and movements were rising in Algeria, Kenya, and beyond. In Congo, Lumumba helped create and then led a new political party, the Mouvement National Congolais, the MNC. Unlike many other parties that were built around one tribe or region, the MNC tried to be national, to bring together different ethnic groups under one flag and one project: a united, independent Congo. For colonial authorities, that was alarming. A leader with mass appeal, a national party, and a clear anti-colonial message was exactly what they feared. Lumumba's activism got him arrested more than once. At one point, he was jailed on charges officially related to embezzlement, in a context where targeting rising nationalists through the courts was common. But prison did not end his influence. When he was released, his stature had only grown. He became one of the main voices at the 1960 talks where Belgium finally admitted the Congo could not be held forever and began negotiating independence. For many ordinary Congolese, Lumumba symbolized the possibility of a future where they would rule their own land. In 1960, Congo held its first elections. The country was huge, fractured, and rushed into democracy without the institutions that Europe had built over centuries. Even in that chaos, Lumumba's MNC did well. He built alliances and emerged as the first prime minister of the Independent Republic of Congo, with Joseph Kasavubu as president. The date was set, June 30th, 1960, and the world was watching. On Independence Day in Leopoldville, the ceremony was supposed to be polite, symbolic, and controlled. Belgium's King Baudouin gave a speech praising his ancestor, King Leopold II, and talking about the civilizing mission of colonialism, downplaying the brutality that had taken millions of Congolese lives. Then, Lumumba did something nobody expected. He stood up and delivered a different kind of speech, one that was not on the official program. He spoke directly to the Congolese people, not to the king. He reminded them of forced labor, of beatings morning, noon, and night, of land stolen and wealth shipped to Europe, of black people treated as inferiors in their own country. He ended by declaring that independence was not a gift from Belgium but the result of struggle, and by calling for African unity and real sovereignty. In that moment, he became a hero across Afrikaans, a problem for the old powers. Independence didn't mean peace. Just days later, the Congolese army still under white Belgian officers, rebelled. Soldiers were angry that nothing seemed to change. Same bosses, same disrespect, just a new flag. Belgium panicked and sent troops back in to protect Europeans, while newspapers filled with stories of chaos and fear. Then came the earthquake. The mineral-rich province of Katanga, backed by Belgian business interests, and Moise Chaume declared it was breaking away from Congo. In one move, the heart of Congo's copper and uranium wealth was pulled out of the new state. Lumumba saw this as a direct attack on the existence of the country. He tried to use the Congolese army to bring seceding regions back under central control, including South Kasai, where operations spiraled into ethnic violence and massacres that hurt his international image. At the same time, he turned to the United Nations, asking them to force Belgian troops to leave and to help reunify Congo. The UN sent peacekeepers, but interpreted their mandate narrowly, focusing on order without taking offensive action against Katanga or directly confronting Belgian and mercenary forces. For Lumumba, this looked like abandonment. For Western powers, his anger and his talk of sovereignty sounded like the beginning of a new radical Africa they could not control. As the crisis deepened, Lumumba reached out to the United States for support, presenting himself as a nationalist, not a communist. Washington hesitated. In the Cold War mindset, a radical African nationalist who criticized the West and might accept Soviet help looked dangerous. When the UN and the US didn't offer the support he needed, Lumumba reached out to the Soviet Union for help. Soviet planes and advisors arrived to assist the central government in Western capitals. This was the red line. Powerful figures began to see Lumumba not just as a troublesome African leader, but as a potential African Castro sitting on enormous mineral wealth. Inside Congo, enemies were gathering. President Kosavubu and Lumumba's relationship collapsed. In September 1960, Kosavubu went on radio to announce that he was dismissing Lumumba as prime minister. Lumumba refused to accept it and declared that Kosavubu was the one who was no longer legitimate. Amid the chaos of rival governments, young Colonel Mobutu stepped up. On September 14th, Mobutu announced what he called a peaceful revolution. He claimed he was neutralizing all politicians until the crisis could be resolved. Western powers liked Mobutu more because he seemed trustworthy. Lumumba was being watched and felt trapped. Technically, still prime minister, he wasn't safe at all in this situation. Internationally, there were discussions in Western intelligence circles about how to eliminate him politically or physically, including poison plots that were never used. Inside the country, his supporters remained strong. Lumumba knew that if he stayed in the capital under Mobutu's watch, he could be quietly removed. So in late 1960, he made a desperate move. He attempted to escape and travel east to Stanleyville, where his allies were organizing resistance. Lumumba left with his wife and child, trying to rally people along the way. But his convoy was spotted. Mobutu's forces captured him near the town of Port-Francois. The man who had been the face of independence was now a prisoner of his own army. What happened next turned Lumumba from a leader into a martyr. After being held and beaten, he was flown, along with two close allies, to the secessionist stronghold of Katanga on January 17, 1961. Katangan leaders and Belgian officers supported the split. The three men were tortured and humiliated. Later that night, they were taken to a remote location, tied to trees, and executed by firing squad. Belgian officers played key roles in directing the operation. His body did not receive a grave. It was secretly dismembered and dissolved in acid. At least one Belgian officer later admitted to taking a tooth as a grim souvenir. For years, the full details of the operation were obscured. But over time, documents emerged showing not only Katangan responsibility, but also deep Belgian political involvement. In 2002, a Belgian parliamentary inquiry recognized the country's role in the events that led to his death. And in 2022, Belgium returned that single tooth to Lumumba's family in a symbolic gesture. Lumumba never lived to see what came after. Congo did not become the united, democratic, Pan-African beacon he imagined. After years of conflict, Mobutu took over, renamed the country Zaire, and ruled as a dictator with Western support. The mineral wealth of Congo copper, cobalt, uranium, coltan continued to flow outward, while ordinary people remained trapped in cycles of war and poverty. For many, this looked exactly like the kind of neo-colonial system Lumumba had warned about. Independence on paper, dependency in reality. Yet his voice refused to die. His independence speech, with its raw list of colonial abuses, and its call for African unity and dignity, is now studied and quoted across the continent and beyond. Murals, streets, universities, and movements carry his name. He has become a symbol of those leaders who tried to push too far, too fast against global powers and paid with their lives. In a letter written from prison shortly before his death, Lumumba said that one day history would speak, and that Africa would write its own story, a story of glory and dignity. When people talk about who really controls Congo's resources or how former colonies can shake off outside influence, Patrice Lumumba always comes up. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.